You already know, the ending of this mini trilogy of my Abyss journey, how I finally got 36 stars in Abyss. Feel free to pause and watch the previous videos if you haven't already. If not, don't worry, this video can still be enjoyed on its own. Let's descend one last time into the Abyss. I'm gonna breeze through talking about floors 9 and 10 because while they did change since the last videos, you're still fine if you have level 80 plus characters. On paper, I thought the ley lines on these floors would be way worse than they ended up being. Floor 9 has this field generated along the edges. This field will gradually close in on you as time goes on. If you're inside that field, you'll be struck by lightning every 5 seconds. Now what the description didn't mention, which I am thankful for, is that the field actually stops closing in on you at certain points depending on the chamber. Also, the lightning damage actually isn't that much and you can easily just go in and out to kill a rogue enemy, block it with a shield, or use a healer. Its only inconvenience is on certain chambers. Enemies are spaced out a lot, kinda low-key countering venties. Suck. But overall, easy floor. Floor 10 reuses a mechanic from a previous event where each wave has one enemy as the leader and the rest are attendants. Attendants provide resistance and healing buffs for the leader. It's pretty self-explanatory, just kill the attendants, which are usually the collection of smaller enemies. I mean, sometimes I just straight up kill the boss just to hit them with the disrespect, since most are pretty easy to one cycle. The Abyss guys even make a return for this video, but I'm a seasoned veteran in dealing with them. Their shields are still dummy thick, though. Floor 11. Now we're getting to the good shit, where the suffering begins. To start, they added a new ley line effect called Corrosion. This effect is applied to your entire team every time an opponent is defeated. They stack and last 10 seconds each, and active characters can be killed by Corrosion while your inactive characters stop losing HP when they're below 15% of their total health. By the way, shields don't protect you from Corrosion. What miHoYo doesn't tell you is that you can't cleanse Corrosion away with any of these characters. The early chambers are the worst because you have 3 to 5 waves of enemies, annoying and a time waster. Even if your inactive characters aren't losing HP, everyone still has Corrosion applied until it expires. So if your active character dies and you still have Corrosion and no healing abilities off cooldown, die. And if that wasn't enough, you realize early on that there's always one enemy in the wave who has a pyro ley line effect, which inflicts pyro damage over time. So not only am I dying from Corrosion stacks, but I'm being burned alive at the same time? Who thought this was a good idea? It's not a mechanic to joke about like I did my initial run. Now yes, as annoying as Corrosion is, there is a workaround. And no, I don't mean rolling for Kokumi solely to beat this floor. So what's the counterplay? Well, shockingly, healers. At the very, very least, everyone who plays has a Barbara. Remember those 50-50s you lost to Jean and Chi-Chi? Use them. The best part is healers require less investment compared to your other teammates, so take advantage of that. Now, I did bring up these 3 and Kokumi because in my opinion, healers who can heal your entire team from their autos or abilities are god tier here. Yes, you can still use your Bennett or Diona if you want, but keep in mind that you're gonna have to be able to micromanage and rapid switch between your team to heal when Corrosion is gone. I'm a simple monkey brain who just used Barbara and Jean on each team, so healing ult go burr, and I can just focus on DPS. I didn't really have to worry about Corrosion or burning after this change. I 3-star Chamber 1 in my initial run, although at one point when I was resetting for Chambers 2 and 3, I ran into a bug where the grass dude just didn't spawn for some reason, so I couldn't trigger the next wave. I skipped 3-starring Chamber 2 right now, don't worry, we'll get to why. It only took 3 attempts to clear Chamber 3, probably because there were fewer enemies, so Corrosion really didn't matter anymore. I will warn you that killing the mage flies does activate Corrosion, which is stupid. If they aren't in this menu, they shouldn't be able to trigger Corrosion, but whatever. Ults go burr in the first half, and then Zhao plunge for the win. Alright, back to Chamber 2. I'm embarrassed to say that this chamber took so many attempts for a few reasons. One, I only felt good going into the second half when I had a very specific run in the first. I needed to use Klee's charge attacks right after Venti's ult went away to keep the treasure hoarders and the pyro gunner together while dealing massive AoE damage, especially the pyro gunner. If he got his shield up, it was an annoying time loss and I just reset. Now, you might think, why is the time loss that important for a chamber that only needs to be cleared within 5 minutes instead of 3? The reason being is that my second team doesn't quite have the synergy as my first. I am pretty limited in my usable artifacts and which characters I can actually give them to, so I just had to run with what I had. No additional buffs for Zhao outside of ZHONGLI, and use a bit of brute force. I would say it was pretty rough just deciding who would be the 4th team member in my second team. I had Kai at first and then Sucrose to try and group the hoarders easier, but since I wasn't applying any elemental reactions, this was just a worse comp. Honestly, looking back, I'm like, what the fuck was I thinking? Plus, Jean can push the projectile guys closer to the others since everyone else will follow me. Once they're closer together, I just unleash my ults, and it was working. I was getting better and closer to that 5-minute goal. Lastly, fuck the samurai. Well, I'm thankful that Mihoyo had a single functioning brain cell. To not have both samurai in this half, he's still tanky and annoying as fuck. Like, that's the main problem with this second half, tanky enemies. Yeah, the treasure hoarders are a joke, but they're still scaled with a lot of HP. That said, I did eventually get the run. It was kind of crazy because my Zhao got killed early, which was entirely my fault. At that moment, I did decide if 2 minutes was enough to kill the remaining enemies with ZHONGLI, Battery Jean, and Ayaka. I am thankful my Ayaka's artifacts allowed her to be either main DPS or just a quick swap to apply cryo or ult. With 26 seconds to spare, 11-2 was finally 3-starred, and the only thing left was floor 12. Thank God Mihoyo didn't add a ley line effect to this one. The high and low tide effect last update was absolute trash, and I hope I never see this mechanic in game ever again. I also realized when going through the footage that Mihoyo didn't add any bullshit aura for the enemies, as it should be, in my opinion. Floor 12 is already enough of a DPS check, as you're about to see. We don't need anything extra unless it actually benefits us, like the geo damage boost back in 1.3. During the time I was struggling on floor 11, I was taking advantage of the fishing event to farm fishes that I needed for the catch and its refinements. I was really tempted to roll on Ball's weapon banner, and I'm glad I didn't because the catch is so good as a free-to-play weapon. Plus, unlike the weapon banner, I can easily max refine it without going into crippling debt. I also got Ball's artifacts upgraded, and for the most part, they were actually pretty good. I still had to get Ball's attack up a bit, but she was definitely ready to join me for the Abyss. On my first run of 12-1, I got 2 stars, finishing at 5-16. Not the worst, and completely doable. Yeah, here's where the torture begins. Alright, the first attempt afterward was a complete bust. I brought Sucrose to help boost elemental mastery for vaporize reactions, but I wasn't destroying the Eye of the Storm or the Spectres fast enough. As good as my Klee is by my standards, she's not great at chasing down enemies, and it's more of a single target enemy if I can't keep the enemies grouped. The second attempt was the same result, where I just wasn't dealing enough damage to the first half of the second wave, and I really just had to re-strategize. Okay, rant time. I fucking hate the Spectres. I knew these assholes would be in Abyss because that's what they did with the Samurai guys in 2.0. If Mihoyo adds a new enemy, just expect to see them in the Abyss at some point. That's the trend so far. I tested in the overworld if it was even possible to group them, and no, you can't. And on top of that, these little shits are little bitches. They'll approach you, attack, and then when you hit them, they just like to run away. And even if you kill them, you have to wait for them to explode for it to count as a death. The Geo ones were the fucking worst. Look how I literally got sniped by one trying to mash swap after getting hit. You can't see them behind the Eye of the Storm or the big dude. And you. Sure, my fault for laughing that the Eye of the Storm was a joke placement. But fuck you, Mihoyo. Why does Mihoyo insist on putting enemies in Abyss that can randomly fucking stall? Look at this, 10 seconds of this shit floating in the air. This is not in the player's control. Sorry, I almost lost my cool there. The only thing left that can rant is Venti, of all things. Venti, I love you, my man. You were the first Archon that came home during the 50-50, and I appreciate your Q, but please aim at the group of enemies instead of one to the side. My other friends who play Venti say, yeah, that's unfortunately common for him to do that, which sucks, pun not intended. I also don't know why his suck was so inconsistent at times, where it wouldn't suck in everyone across the chamber. I do the same positioning and placement, so why? Honestly, the first half was so frustrating because of this inconsistency, but I needed like a god tier run of 45 to 50 seconds on this first half to have enough time for the second half. And it did happen eventually, but the number of resets was just baffling. As for advice, I recommend bringing your best melt or vaporize comp for the second half to try and 1 or 2 cycle the Eye of the Storm. A tip from the YouTuber 12th Harbinger is just focus on the specters if you are unable to auto target the Eye of the Storm that's while it's in the air. Just do that while you wait for it to come back down. AoE damage is your best friend, which honestly could be said about all of Abyss. But finally, after 4 days of painful failures, upgrading a few talents, trying to get faster and faster times, and getting the plus 40 attack and minus 15 defense buff, literally 1 second off in one run, I finally got the 3 stars. A super clutch ending. For Chamber 2, I did 1 test run with my powerhouse team against Maguu Kenki to see if it was even possible to get this done within 90 seconds, and surprisingly, it was possible. Yeah, everyone died during this test, but look at his health bar after 2 minutes. Some tighter gameplay and optimal rotations can make this possible. However, there was one glaring problem. What happens in the situation where I don't have a burst ready and there's not enough time to run away from his attacks? I can't really change this team because they synergize so well and I have no shields. So you know what time it is? It's time for a training arc. I'll leave the links to a few guides on iframing Maguu Kenki's attacks. They're very helpful at describing what to look for in its attacks in the moment you need to sprint dodge. Afterwards, I got on with my friend to practice these dodges against the overworld version. It was definitely worth the time practicing because 1, it's harder to iframe in co-op because of more lag. So actually landing some of these dodges is a massive motivation boost. Second, we practiced for over an hour. Then each went to go try the Abyss again, and the training became almost second nature to us. Some ultra instinct dodges now. And the first run of that day after the training was sub 90 seconds. Such a crazy improvement. I still needed to work on my damage and strategy for the second half, but we're making progress. I had a bad run where Venti, for some reason, auto-targeted behind him. Please, Venti, I know you love alcohol, but please stop having drunk aim. The next day, I had a run that was so close, because the Mirror Maiden actually got dragged towards me at the end of my initial Venti ult. So I started using Jean's fall tech strategy against her as well. I was very lucky that the Mirror Maiden was sticking close to this area after that happened, and I avoided getting marked for so long. That said, I did mess up some of my positionings, letting the mage get her shield and the Mirror Maiden actually TPing out of ZHONGLI ult just to troll me. Sag. It just goes to show how even the small stuff can have a huge impact on your runs. I still believe it was due to positioning and not utilizing the correct gene combo, but the fall tech was inconsistent at times. See, like here, I missed this one, but then I get it on the next. It's a good strategy to use against these Fatui since fall damage is only dependent on the enemy's max HP, and you only need to be within 20 levels to displace them. As you can see, I realized at the end of this practice run, if she's already close to the wall, just tapping E is enough to launch her to collide and take high physical damage. That said, if you're going to use this strat, especially against the Mirror Maiden, I recommend not being dependent on it because as I find, most times you're eventually going to get marked, which does prevent you from using displacement on her. You can still freeze and petrify her, so keep that in mind. I tried again for an hour or so. I was planning on changing teams the next day and use Xiao instead of Venti and hopefully just plunge them to death instead. I probably had one of the worst runs for the first half, 1 minute 50 seconds compared to my previous runs, but I still went along with it just to get more practice on the second half. That's the beautiful thing that you're about to see. Even if you have a shitty start, somehow, some way, you can manage to turn it around. It was a blessing from Mahoya themselves when the Mirror Maiden teleported onto me while Ayaka and Venti ult were still going. I told myself, this is it. I focused up, I chain CC'd them with Jean's E, ZHONGLI, and Venti ult, and somehow yeeted the System Mage in the air. The System Mage died, and the Mirror Maiden was still in the corner with about 25% of her HP. I was so focused on her that I eventually got marked. Slowing the footage down, I call bullshit because you can't really see her water move among all the pretty particle effects Ayaka is doing. Regardless, I pushed forward, I could taste victory. She tried to TP and debate me, but I got that gamer reaction time, and somehow I completed 12-2 with 3 stars. I was only 3 stars away from achieving the dream. A nice person in co-op named Alex let me have the last pufferfish I needed. to R4 the catch. Then I attempted the last chamber to get a feel for it if after all this time, was it even possible for me? My initial buffs going in were plus 20 on Elemental Burst, Energy Recharge, and Attack. Pretty solid buffs. And my first ever attempt was 48 seconds on the first half and finished the second half by 5:51. I got 2 stars, which was pretty good, but it's not 3. I spent the first half of the next day going through and upgrading the majority of talents for my teams. Thanks to my homie BaconSizzle, I got enough pufferfish for max refinement on the catch. Finally, Ball was at her max peak potential that I could get her to. Day 1, my buffs were plus 20 on elemental, skill damage, and attack, and then the crit damage and crit rate card. Still pretty good collection of buffs. The first run got the array down to say 15% HP by 7 minutes. A few runs after were about the same or even down to 10% HP. With better, tighter rotations, I'd just barely be able to get it in time. It would take multiple attempts across 2 days to finally get these rotations down. Day 2, I reset from the start and got Elemental Mastery plus 80, and the crit rate and crit damage card again going into Chamber 3. Not too bad since more Elemental Mastery boosts my reaction damage for Team 2. The game seemed to bug out again. The rune guards at the start just wouldn't move for like 20 seconds. It kept happening 50% of the time from this day moving forward. So when this did happen, I just took a step back to trigger them and then immediately faced them with the ZHONGLI ult. On the final day, I got memed by Mihoyo with this character physical damage resistance plus 30. Thanks, I appreciate it. So I went with the crit rate and crit damage card again. I was going to use this day just to get more practice on my rotations, especially because I kept getting this crab summon, which is the worst one to get. And then a miracle happened. I did the same strategy in rotation for my first half, ZHONGLI into Jean ult, into Ayaka ult, into Zhao ult, delaying my jump here to squeeze extra damage. This first run was slower compared to others. The second half was the same rotations as before, just using my skills till I know what move he's doing first and then unleash hell. Missed the initial hit on Ball's ult here unfortunately, then just rinse and repeat, making sure to keep using Ball's E when off cooldown. I got his health down to about 45% by 820. I was looking around for the summon to kill. Unfortunately, the crab once again, just regenerating everyone's ult and then let Ball wreck shop. She landed 107k, which I didn't notice till editing this video. Consider it a foreshadowing. Thankfully, I wasn't really blocked off like some other runs, so I ran straight to the paralyzed array, using the last few seconds of Ball's ult, and then just start regenerating energy and unleashing ultimates off cooldown. He has a minus 20% on all resistances during this phase, so I had to hit him with everything I got. And then finally, when it was needed most, another 100k crit on Ball's initial burst. At that moment, I knew this was it. I finally did it with 2 seconds to spare. Finally, I achieved the ultimate endgame goal of Genshin. 2 weeks of grinding Abyss and finally getting 36 stars. It's a bittersweet ending. I'm happy and proud that all the efforts, the pain and suffering, the help from friends, and determination ended in victory. But I'm also sad in a way. What do I do now after achieving it? I guess that's something I'll have to find out for myself. I appreciate everyone taking the time to watch this video and join me on this journey. If you enjoyed the video and want to see more story-driven content, maybe some other Genshin challenges, or just support Just More Gamers in general, like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. If not, it's all good. We still appreciate any and all support. I'll end by showing my builds and giving some shoutouts. Again, shout out to the YouTuber 12th Harbinger for their videos and advice when they responded to my comments and replies. I've linked their channel down below. Shout out to the iFrame guides, which I've also linked as well. Shout out to the random co-op player Alex for that one pufferfish. Wherever you are, Alex, I hope your next summons are blessed. Lastly, shout out to my friends BaconSizzle, Chonk, and 014 for letting me take their fish so that I could R5 the catch within 2 weeks. I'm DragonLordLeda, this has been The Abyss, and I'll see you in the next adventure.